You didn't click this randomly. And no, that's not motivation talk. There's a specific phase where people start seeing messages like this, not because they're winning yet, but because they're about to re-enter. Right before a major comeback, something strange happens. Your old life feels finished. Your current state feels unclear, and your future hasn't revealed itself yet. That gap isn't failure. It's the quiet before re-emergence. If things recently fell apart, slowed down, or went silent, this isn't the end of your story. It's the reset before your strongest return. Here's the truth most people don't understand about comebacks. They never start with momentum. They start with withdrawal. Before a major rise, energy pulls inward, plans dissolve. Certainty disappears. Not because you're losing, but because the old structure can't support what's next. People think a comeback looks like motivation. It doesn't. It looks like exhaustion, confusion, detachment. That's because the system is clearing space. If you tried to rise without this phase, you'd recreate the same ceiling. This slowdown isn't punishment. It's preparation. And here's what makes this so disorienting. Everything you were taught about success tells you to push through this moment, to work harder, to stay visible, to keep producing. But that's exactly what keeps people stuck in the same patterns, cycling through the same results, hitting the same walls over and over again. The truth is that authentic transformation requires a death of the old before the birth of the new. Not a metaphorical death. An actual dismantling of the identity, beliefs, and behaviors that created your previous reality. You can't enter a new level while dragging the old one with you. And that's why this phase feels so uncomfortable. You're being asked to let go before you can see what's coming. To release before you receive. To trust before you have proof. Most people interpret this discomfort as evidence they're moving in the wrong direction. They think the exhaustion means they're failing. They think the confusion means they've lost their path. They think the detachment means something is fundamentally broken. But the opposite is true. The exhaustion is your system conserving energy for what's ahead. The confusion is your mind releasing outdated maps that no longer serve you. The detachment is your spirit disconnecting from dependencies that were keeping you small. This is the phase where the ego fights hardest because it senses its control slipping. It will generate every excuse, every doubt, every fear to convince you that something is wrong, that you need to go back, that you should abandon the process, but you can't go back. Not because you've burned bridges, but because you've outgrown the old architecture. Your consciousness has expanded beyond the container that used to hold it. And there's no forcing yourself back into a structure that's too small for who you're becoming. This is why the discomfort is actually confirmation. It means the transformation is real. It means the shift is happening. It means you're not just talking about change. You're living through the uncomfortable part that most people avoid. The people who build lasting success don't skip this phase. They honor it. They recognize it as sacred. They understand that the depth of the transformation is directly proportional to the discomfort of the transition. Shallow change happens fast and feels good. Deep change happens slowly and feels destabilizing. One creates temporary results, the other creates permanent shifts. So when you feel like you're moving backward, consider that you might be moving inward. When you feel like you're losing ground, consider that you might be deepening roots. When you feel like everything is falling apart, consider that everything is actually falling into place, just not in the way you expected. The system isn't broken. Your intuition isn't wrong. Your timing isn't off. You're exactly where you need to be for what's being built inside you. The withdrawal isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Your system knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. That you can't skip the reconstruction phase and expect a stable foundation for what comes next. Think back to every major shift in your life. Right before it happened, something collapsed. A relationship, an identity, a plan, a version of you that once worked. At the time, it felt like loss. But looking back, you can see it clearly. What ended was limiting you. The same pattern is repeating now. You may feel less visible, less driven, less certain. But that's because the old narrative shut down. And narratives always shut down before new ones take control. This is the phase where people quit. Not because they're failing, but because they misinterpret the silence. Silence isn't absence. It's incubation. Look closely at your history. Every breakthrough you've experienced was preceded by breakdown. Every elevation was preceded by elimination. Every expansion was preceded by contraction. This isn't coincidence. It's pattern. It's law. It's the way transformation actually works in the real world, stripped of the fairy tale versions we've been sold. Before you got that opportunity that changed everything, you lost something you thought you needed. Before you met the person who opened new doors, you had to walk away from connections that kept you comfortable. Before you discovered your real path, you had to abandon the one you thought you were supposed to follow. The pattern is consistent, the pattern is reliable, the pattern is happening again right now. But here's what makes it difficult. When you're inside the collapse, you can't see the breakthrough forming. When you're experiencing the ending, you can't imagine the beginning that's coming. When you're in the darkness, you forget that you've been here before. And you've always emerged stronger. Your mind has selective memory. It remembers the winds but forgets the valleys that created them. It celebrates the arrivals but erases the departures that made them possible. It highlights the gains but minimizes the losses that cleared the path. So you're experiencing this pattern as if it's the first time, even though it's the same process you've survived and transcended multiple times before. Think about the relationship that ended and devastated you, until you met someone who showed you what you were actually looking for. Think about the job you lost that felt like the end, until you found the work that actually aligned with your gifts. Think about the dream that died that broke your heart, until you discovered the vision that made the old one look small. Every single time, the collapse was making space. The ending was creating openings. The loss was generating capacity for something you couldn't have held while gripping the old. And here's the deeper truth. You didn't just survive those transitions. You became someone new through them. The person who entered the breakdown is not the person who emerged from it. The identity shifted. The capacity expanded. The awareness deepened. You didn't just get through it. You grew through it, and that's exactly what's happening now. You're not regressing. You're not failing. You're not lost. You're in the space between stories where the old one has ended but the new one hasn't fully formed yet. This is the most creative space you'll ever occupy. This is where everything is possible because nothing is fixed. This is where your future is being written, not by planning or forcing, but by becoming available to what wants to emerge through you. But it doesn't feel creative, it feels empty, it feels uncertain, it feels like you've lost your way. That feeling is the gap between who you were and who you're becoming. That feeling is the space where transformation lives. That feeling is confirmation that you're not playing small anymore. The old narrative shut down because it reached its limit. It told the story it came to tell, it served its purpose. And now, it's complete, but your mind keeps trying to revive it because the known, even when limiting, feels safer than the unknown. So it generates nostalgia for what was, even when what was couldn't take you where you're meant to go. This is why people stay stuck. Not because they can't move forward, but because they keep trying to resurrect what's already finished. They keep trying to force life to look like it used to instead of allowing it to become what it's trying to become. The silence you're experiencing isn't emptiness. It's the pause before the next chapter begins. It's the breath between the end of one sentence and the start of another. It's the space where new narratives are born. And if you can resist the urge to fill it prematurely, if you can sit in the discomfort without rushing to resolve it, something unexpected will emerge. Not from your planning, not from your effort, but from your willingness to let the old story end so the new one can begin. You've done this before, you'll do it again. The pattern is repeating because you're ready for the next level of it. And this time, you have the awareness to recognize what's happening while it's happening. That awareness changes everything. A true comeback isn't improvement, it's reconfiguration. The system doesn't rebuild on top of instability. It dismantles first. Old habits stop working. Old motivations lose power. Old rewards feel empty. That's not regression, that's recalibration. If you're uncomfortable right now, it's because your internal structure is no longer aligned with your next level. The system is removing dependencies. It's stripping identity attachments. It's clearing emotional debt. This is why forcing positivity backfires here. You're not meant to feel up yet. You're meant to reset cleanly. Understanding this requires a complete shift in how you think about success and progress. Most people operate from a building model. They think success is about stacking achievement on top of achievement, constantly adding, constantly accumulating, constantly expanding outward. But that's not how sustainable transformation works. Real transformation operates from a replacement model. It doesn't add to what exists. It replaces what no longer serves with what does. It doesn't build on top of a weak foundation. It breaks down to bedrock and rebuilds from there. This is why you can't force your way through this phase. You can't positive think your way past it. You can't hustle your way around it. Because the point isn't to override the discomfort. The point is to allow the dismantling that needs to happen. Your system is infinitely intelligent. It knows what you need before your conscious mind does. And right now, it's removing everything that would prevent your next level from stabilizing. Think of it like this. If you tried to build a skyscraper on a foundation designed for a small house, the structure would collapse. The foundation couldn't support the weight. The materials couldn't handle the pressure, the design couldn't accommodate the scale. The same is true for your life. And if you tried to create next-level results with your current beliefs, habits, and identity structures, the system would collapse. Not because you're not capable, but because the infrastructure isn't designed to support what you're trying to build. So before you can rise, the system has to upgrade the foundation. That means removing the dependencies that kept you functioning at your previous level. The external validation you relied on. The identity attachments you clung to. The emotional patterns you used to navigate the world. None of those things are bad. They served you perfectly for where you were, but they can't take you where you're going. And your system knows this, so it's systematically removing them even though your conscious mind is panicking about the loss. This is why old habits suddenly stop working. Not because you lost your discipline, but because those habits were designed for a different version of you. They got you here. They can't get you there. This is why old motivations lose their power. Not because you lost your drive, but because those motivations were rooted in proving something, escaping something, or compensating for something. And that energy can't fuel sustainable success. This is why old rewards feel empty. Not because you're ungrateful, but because your value system is upgrading. What used to satisfy you can't satisfy who you're becoming. The discomfort you're feeling isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of evolution. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your belief system is restructuring. Your identity is reorganizing around a new center of gravity. And that process can't happen while you're still performing at your old level. It requires withdrawal. It requires space. It requires a pause in the external so the internal can catch up. This is why the most powerful moves often happen after periods of invisibility. Not because people were lucky, not because they suddenly figured something out, but because they allowed the foundational work to complete before trying to build on top of it. The people who skip this phase and try to force their comeback prematurely end up recreating the same patterns. They might get different results for a while, but eventually they hit the same ceiling because the underlying structure never changed. But the people who honor this phase, who resist the urge to perform before they're ready, who allow the discomfort without trying to escape it, who trust the process even when it feels like nothing is happening. Those are the people whose comebacks last. Because their comeback isn't built on motivation, it's built on transformation. It's not built on effort, it's built on alignment. It's not built on force, it's built on foundation. And that kind of comeback doesn't need to be maintained. It doesn't require constant effort to sustain. It doesn't depend on perfect conditions or consistent motivation. It moves naturally because the internal structure finally matches the external ambition. So if you're feeling uncomfortable right now, that's actually confirmation that the work is happening. The discomfort isn't a sign to retreat. It's a sign that the recalibration is real. Your system isn't broken, it's upgrading. And upgrades always require a shutdown before the restart. The question isn't whether you should trust the process. The question is whether you can stay present with the discomfort long enough to let the process complete. Because on the other side of this dismantling is the most solid version of you that's ever existed. Not the most impressive, not the most visible, but the most stable. And stability is what creates sustainability. Sustainability is what creates legacy. Legacy is what creates impact that lasts beyond the moment. That's what's being built in the silence. That's what's forming in the withdrawal. That's what's emerging from the collapse, a version of you that doesn't need to collapse again. The power shift happens the moment you stop trying to rush your comeback, when you stop asking, when will it happen, and start allowing, let it finish restructuring. That patience doesn't delay success, it amplifies it, because what comes next won't need constant effort, it will move naturally. With less resistance, less self-doubt, less burnout. This is where strength actually forms. There's a specific moment in every transformation where power transfers from effort to alignment, from forcing to allowing, from pushing to receiving, and that moment always arrives the same way, when you finally stop fighting the process. Most people never reach this moment because they're too busy trying to speed up the timeline. They're convinced that patience equals passivity, that allowing equals giving up, that surrender equals defeat. But the opposite is true. Patience is active trust. Allowing is conscious receptivity. Surrender is strategic release. And the moment you make that shift, the moment you stop trying to control the timing and start trusting the unfolding, everything changes. Not because the external circumstances suddenly shift, but because your relationship to the process transforms. You stop being at war with where you are. You stop resenting the pace. You stop comparing your timeline to someone else's highlight reel. And in that release, you access a level of power that effort could never generate. Here's why. When you're forcing, you're operating from scarcity. You're trying to make something happen because you're afraid it won't happen on its own. You're pushing because you don't trust the pull. You're controlling because you fear the unknown. That energy is expensive. It drains you. It creates resistance. It generates burnout. And even when it produces results, those results require constant maintenance because they're built on a foundation of force. But when you shift into allowing, you're operating from sufficiency. You're not trying to make something happen. You're making space for it to emerge. You're not pushing against resistance. You're removing the blocks that create it. You're not controlling the outcome. You're aligning with the process. That energy is sustainable. It energizes you. It eliminates resistance. It prevents burnout. And when it produces results, those results compound naturally because they're built on a foundation of alignment. This is the power shift, from manufacturing outcomes to magnetizing them. And it only happens when you stop rushing the comeback and start honoring the restructuring. Think about the last time you tried to force something before it was ready. A conversation you pushed before the timing was right. A launch you rushed before the foundation was solid. A relationship you accelerated before the trust was built. What happened? Either it collapsed immediately, or it required constant effort to maintain, or it eventually fell apart because the structure couldn't support the weight. Now think about the times when you allowed things to unfold naturally, when you trusted the timing even though it felt slow, when you focused on the foundation even though it wasn't visible, when you prioritized alignment over speed. What happened? Things moved with less resistance. Opportunities appeared without you chasing them. Connections deepened without you forcing them. Results compounded without you maintaining them. That's the difference between force and flow. And flow only emerges when you stop trying to rush the process. But here's what makes this difficult. Nothing external validates your patience while it's happening. No one applauds you for allowing. No one celebrates you for trusting. No one acknowledges that you're doing the deeper work. In fact, the world often rewards rushing. It celebrates busy. It glorifies hustle. It admires people who force things to happen before they're ready. Until those things fall apart. Until the burnout hits. Until the forced structure collapses under its own weight. And then everyone wonders what happened. They wonder how someone who seemed so successful could suddenly implode. They wonder how someone with so much momentum could suddenly lose it all. But the people who understand this phase know exactly what happened. The foundation never solidified. The structure was built on force, not alignment. The success was manufactured, not magnetized. And manufactured success has an expiration date. But magnetized success, that lasts, that compounds, that builds on itself naturally because the internal structure matches the external expression, and that's what's being created in this phase. Not impressive results that disappear quickly, but foundational shifts that generate sustainable outcomes. The moment you stop asking, "When will it happen?" is the moment you stop being dependent on external validation to confirm you're on the right path. You stop needing proof before you trust. You stop requiring certainty before you move. And in that release, you access a different kind of knowing. Not intellectual certainty, but embodied trust. The kind that doesn't need to be defended or explained or justified. The kind that moves quietly and lands powerfully. This is where real strength forms, not in the visible moments of achievement, but in the invisible moments of surrender, not when you're pushing through, but when you're allowing through. The power isn't in the comeback itself. The power is in the person who emerges ready for it, and that person is being formed right now, in the waiting, in the uncertainty, in the space between what was and what's coming. So the question isn't, when will my comeback happen? The question is, am I allowing the restructuring that will make my comeback sustainable? Because you can force a temporary rise, but you can't force a permanent shift. That only comes through the patience to let the foundation solidify before building on top of it. And that patience isn't passive. It's the most active choice you'll ever make. The choice to trust the process more than you trust the pressure. The choice to honor the timing more than you honor the urgency. The choice to prioritize depth over speed. That's where the power lives. That's where the shift happens. That's where strength actually forms. In the space between trying to control it and trusting it to unfold. One of the hardest parts of this phase is that nothing external confirms it. No applause, no validation, no visible progress. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But internally, everything is changing. Energy is being rerouted. Identity is being rewritten. Limits are being removed. This is why comebacks shock people. No one sees them forming. They only notice when the shift is already complete. The invisibility of this phase is what makes it so challenging to navigate. You're doing the deepest work of your life and no one can see it. You're making the most important shifts and no one acknowledges them. You're building the strongest foundation you've ever had and no one validates the progress. Because the work is entirely internal. There's no external metric for releasing limiting beliefs, no scoreboard for upgrading your identity, no leaderboard for rewiring your nervous system, no public recognition for clearing emotional debt. The most transformative work happens in complete silence, in private moments, in internal shifts that leave no visible trace until the results suddenly appear. And that's what makes this phase feel impossible sometimes, because we've been conditioned to measure progress through external markers, likes, followers, revenue, recognition, achievement, status. But none of those metrics track the work that matters most. None of those markers measure the transformation that creates lasting change. None of those signals confirm that you're moving in the right direction, so you're left navigating by feel, by intuition, by trust. And that requires a level of self-belief that most people can't sustain when the external world offers no confirmation. This is why most people quit during this phase. Not because they're actually failing, but because they need external validation to believe they're succeeding. And when that validation doesn't come, they interpret the absence as evidence that nothing is working. But the absence isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of depth. Surface-level change is visible immediately. You change your routine and people notice. You change your appearance and people comment. You change your content and people respond. But deep change? That's invisible. It's happening in your consciousness, in your belief system, in your nervous system, in your identity structure. And none of those shifts show up externally until they've solidified internally. Think about a seed underground. From the surface, it looks like nothing is happening. The soil looks the same. The ground appears unchanged. There's no visible sign of life or growth or progress. But underground, everything is happening. Roots are forming. Energy is building. Structure is developing. And when the conditions are right, the breakthrough will be sudden and undeniable. That's exactly what's happening for you right now. From the outside, it might look like you've gone quiet, like you've slowed down, like you've stepped back or given up or lost your edge. But the people who understand this process know better. They know that the quiet ones are often preparing the loudest returns. They know that the invisible phases produce the most visible results. They know that true power builds in private before it expresses in public. This is why comebacks shock people. Because no one sees them forming. They're not documented on social media. They're not announced in advance. They're not performed for an audience. They're built in silence, in solitude. In the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And then one day, the shift is complete. The internal work has stabilized, the new foundation is solid, and the external expression begins to match the internal transformation. That's when people notice. That's when they start asking what changed. That's when they want to know your secret or your strategy or your system. But there's no secret. There's only the willingness to do invisible work without needing visible credit. There's only the patience to build internally while nothing confirms it externally. There's only the trust that the process is working even when the evidence hasn't appeared yet. And here's the deeper truth. The invisibility is actually protection, because if this work were visible, you'd be tempted to perform it instead of embody it. You'd be managing perception instead of deepening transformation. You'd be curating the process instead of surrendering to it. The invisibility forces you to do the work for yourself, not for an audience. It forces you to trust yourself, not external validation. It forces you to build from the inside out, not the outside in. And that's the only way to create something that lasts, because anything built for visibility will crumble when the attention fades. But what's built in invisibility, that's permanent, that's foundational, that's real. So if you feel like no one sees what you're going through right now, you're right. They don't. They can't. This work isn't meant to be witnessed, it's meant to be lived, and when the time comes for the external expression, you won't need to announce it or prove it or explain it. It will simply be obvious, the shift will be undeniable, the transformation will speak for itself. Because real change doesn't need a press release, it doesn't need validation or approval or recognition. It just is. And that's the version of success that actually lasts, not the kind that requires constant maintenance and external confirmation, but the kind that stands on its own because it was built on a foundation so solid that nothing can shake it. So let this phase be invisible. Let the work happen in private. Let the transformation unfold without an audience. Because what's coming won't need to be announced, it will be too obvious to miss. And the people who doubted your silence will be the first ones shocked by your return. Not because you proved them wrong, but because you built something so undeniable that their doubt became irrelevant. That's the power of invisible work. That's the gift of this phase. That's the setup for what's next. If this message resonates, you're not meant to chase motivation right now. You're meant to stay available. Available for clarity, available for alignment, available for the version of you that doesn't need to prove anything. That's the version that lasts. Your comeback won't look loud at first, it will feel calm, grounded, certain, and when it begins, it won't ask for permission. There's a specific moment in every transformation where the new identity locks in, where it's no longer something you're trying to become. It's simply who you are, where it's no longer an aspiration or a goal or a future version. It's your present reality. This moment doesn't happen through effort. It happens through integration, through allowing the internal shifts to stabilize, through giving the new structure time to become your default, not your exception. And that's exactly what's happening for you right now. You're not chasing motivation because the version of you that's emerging doesn't run on motivation. It runs on alignment. It moves from clarity, not compulsion. It operates from certainty, not constant effort. That's a completely different operating system than the one you've been running on. And switching operating systems requires a full shutdown and restart. You can't just install new software on top of old programming and expect it to function properly. The old system ran on external validation, on proving yourself, on constantly doing more to feel like enough, on performing success instead of embodying it. That system worked for a while. It got you results, it created momentum, it generated recognition, but it also generated exhaustion and anxiety and burnout and a constant nagging feeling that no matter how much you achieved, it was never quite enough. Because that system was designed for survival, not sustainability, for proving, not being, for chasing, not attracting. And you've outgrown it. The version of you that's emerging doesn't need to prove anything, not because you've already proven yourself, but because you've realized that proving was never the point. The point was becoming someone who doesn't need external confirmation to know their value. This is identity lock-in. This is the moment when your sense of self stops being dependent on what you do and starts being rooted in who you are. When your worth stops being tied to your productivity and starts being inherent. When your certainty stops coming from outcomes and starts coming from alignment. And that shift changes everything. Because when you're not trying to prove yourself, you stop making decisions from fear. You stop saying yes to opportunities that don't align just because you're afraid of missing out. You stop performing for people who don't actually see you. You start moving from a completely different place, from discernment instead of desperation, from clarity instead of confusion, from alignment instead of anxiety. And that energy creates completely different results. Not bigger necessarily, but better, more sustainable, more aligned, more true. This is why your comeback won't look loud, because it's not coming from the same place your previous attempts came from. It's not fueled by the need to prove something or escape something or compensate for something. It's fueled by alignment, by knowing, by certainty that doesn't need to be defended or explained. And that energy moves differently. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't perform, it doesn't need applause or validation or recognition to confirm it's real. It just moves. Naturally, inevitably, powerfully. Think about the people whose presence commands attention without them trying to command it. The people who create impact without forcing it. The people whose success feels effortless because it's coming from alignment, not effort. That's the version of you that's locking in right now. Not the version that's trying to be impressive, but the version that's simply expressed. Not the version that's chasing worthiness, but the version that knows it's inherent. Not the version that's proving something, but the version that's living something. And when that version fully locks in, when it becomes your default operating system instead of your aspiration, your comeback won't need to be planned or forced or manufactured. It will simply begin. Naturally, inevitably, undeniably. Because it won't be coming from you trying to make something happen. It will be coming from you finally allowing what's been trying to emerge. This is why staying available is more important than chasing motivation right now. Because motivation is about forcing action. Availability is about allowing alignment. Motivation asks, what can I do to make this happen? Availability asks, what wants to emerge through me? Motivation requires constant effort to maintain. Availability creates natural momentum. Motivation comes from the head. Availability comes from the whole system. And when your whole system is aligned, when your beliefs, your identity, your nervous system, your energy, and your actions are all moving in the same direction, the results don't require force. They emerge naturally, they compound effortlessly, they sustain themselves. That's what's being built right now. Not temporary motivation, but permanent alignment. Not surface-level changes, but identity-level transformation. And when it locks in, you won't need to announce it. You won't need to prove it. You won't need to defend it or explain it or justify it. You'll just be it. And that version of you, that's the version that creates legacy, that builds impact, that generates results that last beyond the moment. So if this message resonates, trust what's happening. Trust the withdrawal, trust the recalibration, trust the identity shift that's taking place beneath the surface. Because you're not falling behind. You're not losing ground. You're not missing your window. You're becoming the version of you that doesn't miss windows, because you create them. And when that version fully emerges, your comeback won't need permission. It won't need approval. It won't need validation. It will simply be undeniable, because it won't be coming from trying. It will be coming from being. And being always outlasts doing. So if things feel quiet, unfinished, or undefined, don't panic. That's the signal. You're not behind. You're not missing anything. You're not starting over. You're regrouping before your strongest return yet. The quiet isn't emptiness, it's preparation. The unfinished feeling isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of transition. The undefined state isn't confusion. It's the space where new possibilities are forming. Everything you've heard up to this point has been leading to this understanding. What you're experiencing right now isn't the problem, it's the process. And the process is exactly what creates the breakthrough. You're not broken. You're breaking through. You're not lost. You're being redirected. You're not stuck. You're being prepared. And preparation always feels like pause to the person experiencing it, but it's not pause. It's power building. It's energy consolidating. It's structure forming beneath the surface. Think about everything that's happened to bring you to this moment. Every ending, every loss, every disappointment, every plan that fell apart, every certainty that dissolved. None of it was random. None of it was punishment. None of it was evidence that you're on the wrong path. All of it was clearing. All of it was making space. All of it was removing what couldn't support what's next. And now you're in the space that was cleared, the undefined space, the space with no clear path forward because the old map doesn't work anymore and the new one hasn't fully revealed itself yet. This space is sacred. This space is rare. This space is where transformation actually happens, not where it's talked about or planned or imagined, but where it's lived. Most people avoid this space. They fill it immediately with distraction, with busy work, with anything that makes them feel productive even if it's not aligned.